Hello guys, welcome to our next tutorial lesson. For this tutorial lesson, we are going to be seeing how to work with states and use certain events to actually change or modify states. So in React.js, we have two types of components, functional and a class components, and each of these type of components have their own different ways of handling or defining their states. And at the heart of every component is its state, and it's usually an object or a variable that determines how the components behave or renders. And also, in effect, it actually holds the data or the information about a given component. Also, when working with state, it actually allows you to create dynamic components and that are also interactive. That's very interactive due to the fact that you can actually determine how the state should actually behave or being rendered with respect to its state. So what I already have two files here created within this folder components. One is class components and another functional components. So you can go on ahead and pause the video and create these two JSX files, and also you go within the app.js and you actually import these files. We have the class components and the functional components being rendered like that. So I'll simply go straight away and do npm install on my terminal to get the node modules. So while that is installing, we would simply go straight away into the class components and see how we can create a state within this class components. So firstly, we start with the constructor and we pass in our props like that, and the super keyword, and now we proceed to our state. And we initialize it to 0. So right here we have a state actually being initialized to 0, and I actually call that state count. So I'm going to go within this render method and display our state. So in order for us to do that, I'll simply get rid of this. I'm going to write, let me leave that. I'm going to create an h1 tag like that, and let's just say class component, so we know the different components that are actually being rendered in our app.js. So right here I'm going to use an h4 to display account. So we use the this keyword dot state dot count, just like that. So right now I'm going to do npm start to start the server.
But mankind won't be destroyed. The fact that you and I are working here today is evidence of that.
Okay, so we actually have up here class components, and we have its states being displayed down here 0. So if we actually come here and we maybe change this to 1000, we come here, we are still going to see 1000. So for a functional component, what usually happens is we actually make use of the useState hook in order to create the state of a functional component. And a hook is a special function that actually enables you to use special React utilities, and also without the need of probably having to define classes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come within this functional component. I'm going to import useState from React like that, and I'm going to create a state called counts and a setter to actually change our state, set counts like that, and we are going to initialize that to 1000. So I'm going to get rid of this and put that within an h1 tag, just like what we did within our class component. So I'm going to come here, I'll put an h4, and I'm going to display our state just like that. So once we come here, we see 1000 being displayed from our class components, and we also see 1000 being displayed from our functional components. Now, how do we actually change our state in both of these components. So for a class component, in order to change our state, what we are going to do is we are going to create a button like this. Let's just say change state, and we are going to add an on-click events listener to it. So with this, we are going to have this dot set state. We are going to pass in our state and the new value. So once we do this, we can now go to our browser. So sorry, we are going to have here this dot state dot count, like that. So that's it. So when we come here and we probably click, we actually see our state actually being incrementing here. So we see this from our class component. And also to change our state within our functional components, what we do is that we would simply come back here, and we are also going to put a button here, and let's just say change state, and we are going to add an on-click event listener to this. So let's just do set count, and in this case we simply do counts plus 1 like this in parentheses. So if we come here and we also click, we actually see that the state of this functional component is actually also changing, and if we also do this, we actually see the same results. So for a functional component, what usually happens is we, like we said, we make use of a hook use state to actually define our state, while for a class component it actually comes with a constructor that actually provides us a way of actually defining its own state. And also, if we are supposed to use this state probably as an object for our browser, we are going to see that being displayed within our input fields. And also, if we try to actually change this value, we realize that we cannot actually change that since we are not actually updating our state. So we are going to create our own custom on change function. So what this function actually do is that it's actually going to take our state, return the previous value, that's copy our state, the initial state or the initial values which were actually stored within our state, and update whatever key we actually want to update, probably the name or the email. So we are going to have here set form data. We are going to use a spread operator to copy the items that were initially within our array, and based on the target, so we are going to give our input fields a name value, so we actually detect which input field is changing. So I'll come here and I'm going to say name is equals to name, and also here I'm going to say name is equals to email, just like that. So at this point in time, I'm going to pass in our event listener, or the events from our input field, which is e, and I'm going to do e.target.name, and I'm going to change the value to e.target the value that we are actually changing our input field to. So with that, we can now come on this our input fields and pass in an unchange. Just like that. So I'll simply copy this, and I'm also going to put that here. So let's display our states. Like that. So what we are going to now do is that let's just pass this within our unchange, such that when we update our state, we actually display what values we actually have stored within our state. So we'll simply come here now. Let's go to our inspect tab, the console. Set an event on change. Let's refresh the page and see. So actually that was an old error, so we can actually get rid of this, and each time we actually change an input field, we actually see how our state also changes. And each time we update our state, that's the name, we actually see it being updated here, and each time we change the email, we also see it being displayed there, just like that. So now if you realize we have a bit of a lag, that's because we are actually trying to update our state and actually display that same state within this same function. So at the end, it only displays the previous state, which before the one that you're actually currently editing. So in order to do this, we could probably introduce another hook, which is use effect. Like that, and we probably detect for any changes within our input field. So once we are here, we actually display that once any value or we experience a certain change, so we are going to pass in a dependency array here. So the use effect is actually a hook which actually performs or runs a certain function based on some changes or some certain events that you actually pass in within the dependency array. So what usually happens is you say, if actually we experience probably a change in state or a change in this variable, in our case any changes in our form data, what should happen? We should display our form data. So I'm simply going to come here, and once we change, we actually see that the updates are live and there is no lagging. So if I try to change maybe this to this, we actually see, unlike in the previous scenario.
Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share.